Imagine a neighborhood where your neighbors have lived for decades. The corner store knows your name. The rent is manageable. Then the rent on your block doubles. A coffee shop opens, then a renovated apartment building, then another. The corner store is gone, replaced by a wine bar. And the neighbors you've known for years are starting to disappear. Not because they wanted to leave, but because they can no longer afford to stay. This is gentrification. And the question economists have wrestled with for decades is simple. Who wins and who pays? To answer that question, you have to understand that gentrification is not a random event. It follows a specific economic sequence, a chain reaction set off by one simple force: demand. When more people want to live in a particular place than there are homes available, prices go up. That is not a political statement. That is supply and demand, the most basic mechanism in all of economics. What makes gentrification interesting and complicated is that the demand doing the driving is often coming from people with significantly more money than the people already living there. And when higher income demand enters a market with limited housing supply, the consequences are not neutral. They fall unevenly. Some people benefit enormously. Others face costs they did not choose and cannot easily escape. Hey, it's CJ, the creator of this channel. If you ever thought making money on YouTube requires fancy equipment, special software, and a microphone, I want to challenge you. This video right here is faceless. It was made using a software I made called topictovideo.com. There is no camera and no host, not even a scriptwriter or a voice actor. It was made from a simple topic I was interested in. The visuals, the voiceover, the script, and the music were all generated automatically. Your first one is free at topictovideo.com. Back to the video. The process typically begins when a neighborhood that was previously overlooked starts getting noticed. Maybe it has good transit access. Maybe it sits next to a more expensive area that has priced people out. Maybe artists or young professionals move in because the rents are cheap and their presence makes the area feel more appealing to others. Whatever the trigger, the neighborhood gets discovered. And once that happens, a feedback loop begins. More people want in, word spreads, investors start paying attention, property values, the prices that landlords and developers are willing to pay for buildings begin to climb. At this stage, the change is subtle. A few new faces on the block, a couple of renovated facades. Most longtime residents might not even notice yet, but the economic signal has been sent, and the market is already responding. Once demand starts climbing and the supply of available housing stays fixed, and in most cities, supply moves very slowly because land is scarce and building new units takes years, rents begin to rise. Not just a little. In many documented urban neighborhoods, rents in rapidly gentrifying areas have risen by 50, 80, even over 100% within a decade. If a family was paying $1,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, a 100% increase means they now owe $2,000 a month. For a household living paycheck to paycheck, that is not an inconvenience. That is a crisis. And this is where the economic mechanism gets sharp. The price signal that attracts new investment and makes the neighborhood more valuable for some is the exact same price signal that starts squeezing everyone who was already there. Now here's the part that makes gentrification complicated, because not everything that follows rising demand is bad. When more affluent residents move into a neighborhood, they bring purchasing power. Local businesses see more customers. Property tax revenues can increase, which sometimes means better funded schools and public services. Landlords who are sitting on aging, underinvested buildings suddenly have a financial reason to renovate. New grocery stores, gyms, park improvements, and restaurants move in to serve the new demographic. For the people who own property in the neighborhood, whether they are longtime homeowners or investors who bought in early, the rising prices are a windfall. A house that was worth $150,000 a decade ago might now be worth $400,000. That is real, tangible wealth creation for the people holding the asset. The neighborhood, measured by investment and infrastructure, objectively improves. But here is the trade-off at the center of this entire story. The same price increases that generate wealth for property owners impose costs on everyone who rents. And in lower income neighborhoods, the exact neighborhoods most likely to gentrify, renters typically outnumber owners by a wide margin. Those renters do not capture any of the rising property value. They do not get a windfall, they get a bill. When a landlord's building triples in assessed value, the landlord's incentive flips. The calculus shifts from keeping long-term tenants to upgrading the unit and charging market rate for it. If the city has weak or no rent stabilization laws, and many American cities do not have them, the landlord can raise rent to whatever the market will bear, or convert the units to condos, or simply not renew the lease. The tenant must then find housing in a market where every nearby neighborhood is also getting more expensive, because the gentrification wave tends to move outward from its origin point and push lower income residents further and further from where they used to live and work. The squeeze is not just on residents. Local businesses feel it too, and the mechanism is the same. Their commercial rent goes up as the neighborhood becomes more desirable. A family-run laundromat that has operated for 30 years suddenly faces a landlord who can get 3 times the rent from a boutique retailer. The laundromat closes. The boutique opens. For new residents, this looks like the neighborhood improving. For the customers who depended on that laundromat, that barbershop, that grocery that carries specific foods, it is a practical loss. Their services are gone. The businesses that replace them serve a different customer at a different price point. The neighborhood is better resourced and simultaneously worse suited to the people who had been living there. That is the paradox. So who actually wins? The clearest winners in a gentrifying neighborhood are landowners, people who held property before the value surge and can now sell or rent at dramatically higher prices. Real estate investors who recognize the trend early and bought in before prices peaked capture most of the upside. Developers who buy, renovate, and sell at the new market price profit directly from the transformation. The new, more affluent residents benefit too. They get a neighborhood with improving amenities at prices that are high by the old neighborhood standards, but often still below comparable areas elsewhere in the city. And in a narrow fiscal sense, the city itself can benefit from higher tax revenues on more valuable land. These gains are real, but they are concentrated. They flow primarily to people who already hold capital, property, savings, investment capacity. And who pays? The most direct answer is renters, particularly lower income renters who have been living in the neighborhood precisely because it was affordable. They face rent increases with no offsetting gains. They may be displaced to neighborhoods further from their jobs, further from their children's schools, and further from the social networks they spent years building. The secondary answer is local business owners without property ownership. People who lease their storefronts and now face rent costs their revenues cannot match. There is also a more diffuse cost that is easy to miss, the loss of what economists sometimes call neighborhood-level social capital. The informal networks, the mutual support, the institutions that made a community functional, these do not survive displacement intact. When people scatter, those networks break apart. The central economic question in all of this is not whether neighborhoods should change. They always do. The real question is, who captures the gains when they become more valuable, and who is asked to absorb the costs? Right now, the market answers that question through price signals alone. Higher prices attract capital and repel lower income residents. That is how markets work when there are no countervailing forces. Some cities have experimented with tools meant to shift that distribution. Rent stabilization policies, community land trusts, inclusionary zoning. These approaches come with their own trade-offs. There is no policy that gives everyone the full upside with none of the downside. But the tools that exist are designed to do one thing: change who captures the gains and who bears the costs. Gentrification is not simply neighborhood improvement, and it is not simply displacement. It is a market process that does both simultaneously. Rising demand lifts property values and draws in investment, which makes neighborhoods more functional and better resourced. Those same rising prices shift who can afford to stay, transferring costs onto the people with the least capacity to absorb them and concentrating the gains in the hands of those who already hold assets. The neighborhood gets better, and the people who kept it alive often cannot afford to see what it becomes. That is not a story about good people and bad people. It is a story about how markets distribute outcomes and about the consistent gap between who creates value in a place and who gets to keep it. Understanding that gap is the first step toward thinking clearly about what, if anything, should be done about it. Hey, it's CJ, the creator of this channel. Before you go, I want to tell you something. The video you just watched, the script, the narration, the visuals, I made all of it with the tool I built called topictovideo.com. And here's the honest story of why it exists. I wanted to make money on YouTube and I didn't know how. I wasn't a videographer, I wasn't an editor, and I wasn't interested in being on camera. But I kept seeing faceless YouTube channels building real audiences and real income. I knew there was an opportunity there if I could just get past the production wall. So I built the system I used to create this video. And once it worked for me, it made sense to share it. This is what topictovideo.com does. You type a topic you're interested in, and the system researches it, writes a world-class script, generates a voiceover, builds the visuals, and puts everything together for you to publish to YouTube. No camera, no microphone, no fancy equipment, and no editing skills required. Try it for free at topictovideo.com. I'll see you in the next one.